Hi, welcome to the channel, and today we're in County Kent in the UK, specifically in Canterbury, the city with a cathedral with a 1,400 year history. So today we're going to talk about hiring an electric car, the Polestar 2 in the UK. We're going to talk about driving an EV in the UK and charging, and also we might check out Leeds Castle. So stay with us. This video is brought to you by ReGen EV Charging Install, Australia's residential and commercial EVSE installation specialists. Links to these sponsors are in the show notes. Hi, my name's Greg and welcome to Electric Car Australia, the Aussie EV YouTube channel with practical advice and real world experiences. Well, as we mentioned, we're on a family holiday here in the UK at the moment, and this is an unscripted video that I just wanted to put together with you guys and explain a little bit about our experience hiring an EV here in the UK. Also charging it, finding chargers, some interesting things about parking and parking costs here in the UK. And also, yeah, we'll show you guys around a couple of tourist attractions, specifically Leeds Castle, which is a beautiful castle here or just outside Canterbury. And the Canterbury Cathedral will include some shots there as well. Unfortunately, on this trip, there's a lot of restoration work going on, so there's a lot of scaffolding up around the cathedral, so it makes it a little bit difficult to get some actual shots for you, but we will include some of those further through the video. So look, firstly, let's talk about hiring an EV in the UK. So look, reasonably simple. We jumped online when we were back in Australia and we booked a EV via a company, and I'll put all the links in the show notes. But basically this is a Hertz car. It's a Polestar 2, the first generation vehicle. We didn't order it or book it directly through Hertz. It was a little bit cheaper to go through a third-party sort of aggregating app. Now, the interesting thing about that was when we went to pick the car up at the airport, there was no problems with picking it up, went to the Hertz office, all good. But the difference is, and just something to be aware of, with the insurances, so basically we paid to reduce our insurance excess to zero, but that was with the third-party app aggregator company. So when you pick the car up from Hertz, you actually need to sign and agree that you'll pay their £2,500, which is obviously a lot of money, but you'll pay that excess, and then you need to claim it back via the third party. So just be aware of that. We didn't see that in the fine print when we signed up for it. So not really a problem, touch wood, we won't have any accidents, but just be aware if you do use a third-party sort of discount aggregator, like a Webjet, for instance, if you're booking tickets, you might need to pay the access to the rental car company and then claim it back via the third party. Other than that, smooth transaction, no different to hiring any other car if you've done that before. And in the UK, we landed at Stansted Airport, first time we've flown into there. A lot of discount carriers and sort of smaller domestic close European flights go in there. Absolutely no problems at all. The airport wasn't busy, and I was a little concerned. I've heard some stories about when you book an EV, sometimes you get to the rental company and they go, sorry, we're all out, you'll have to take a petrol or diesel. There was literally lines and lines of Polestar 2s. So for Hertz, that's obviously a mainstay EV, and they were lined up everywhere, so no problems with that. Pick the car up, 80% charge, so you pick it up with 80%, you drop it back with 80%, which makes sense because when you're charging up, you can't generally charge right at the airport, so it makes sense, unlike a petrol car where you can sort of fill it right up and arrive and you're pretty much still full. An EV, if you charge it on a motorway services, for instance, and then you have to drive 20 or 30 mile, it won't be at 100%. So yeah, 80% you pick it up, you return it with 80%. We set the sat-nav, we didn't log our phone in or anything, so we just went with the default. The Polestar, as most EVs these days, they've just got the SIM card in it, the rental company look after all that. So we had access to Google Maps, access to Spotify, which the kids have been loving, and all that sort of stuff. So we just plugged in the address of our friends down in Canterbury, hit the motorways, off we went. This is a long-range vehicle. I'll put the numbers up on the screen. So we have absolutely no problems getting from the airport down here. We've been driving around. Our friends live in a house which does have a driveway, which is rare in the UK. So a lot of houses, people live in terrace houses. They don't have off-street parking, etc. So if you know anything about sort of some of these more densely populated European cities, you'll know that charging can be a problem with EVs. Our friends do have off-street parking, a driveway, however they don't have a power point. So what we done was, to do a little bit of trickle charging, we just plugged into the normal 10 amp power point. We run an extension lead out the letterbox in the front door, and we put a little bit of charge in, but really that was very little. So our charging has been at motorway service centres, or there is around the streets if you use PlugShare or a Better Out Planner or various different apps. You can find street AC parking, so that's 7, 11, 22 kilowatt charging. You do need to be aware of parking, so basically you cannot park anywhere around these areas for free. So even when we take the kids to the playground, so there's some beautiful parks in Canterbury, and I'll put a few photos up there. Unlike in Australia, where we can just drive, park in a car park, walk the kids into the park, here you need to pay for parking. So there's actually no free activities or events. So even if you're going to a park and you're going to climb on the jungle gym for an hour, you're likely to need to pay a couple of pounds for parking in the council car park at the actual playground. So the only way to have a free day out is to get somebody to drop you off and then come back and pick you up. So yeah, that's just something very different in Australia. We've got a lot of international friends who come to Australia, and they're astounded by the free activities and just how, ignoring their exchange rates, but just how cheap it is in Australia. You don't have to spend a lot of money on entertainment with kids and that sort of thing. Obviously, if we go to Dreamworld and SeaWorld, you pay for those sort of theme parks. But South Bank, for instance, in Brisbane, South Bank has a beautiful man-made beach. There's restaurants, there's free electric barbecues. You can sit and have picnics. It's all free. You just rock up into the city, you walk into the parklands, it's all free. Yes, if you drive a car into the city, obviously you need to park. But any of these sort of little locations around here, you just can't park for free anywhere. Goes for the shopping centres and supermarkets as well. There's very limited free parking. So getting back to what I was going to say, there is AC street parking dotted around the city, but generally you also still have to pay for parking, and the parking is more expensive than the charging. So just be aware that you do often need to add the cost of the parking for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it is, and the charging together. And keep in mind, when you're AC charging, it's a lot slower than if you're DC rapid or ultra rapid charging at a service centre. So that leads us to the price of the charging. Again, I'll put that up on the screen. Now look, it varies widely. So talking to people here in the UK, gridserve is a energy company that have recently been rolling out what they're calling electric forecourts. Now these are beautiful establishments, buildings. They're like the big sort of roadhouse in Australia. They've got canopies, they've got lots of coffee shops, that sort of thing, multiple EV chargers under canopies. Now look, they're on the big sort of dotted around on biggish motorways and stuff. From what I've seen, they're probably the most expensive in the UK. I haven't used one. Again, primarily this is a family holiday, so I've got to be a little bit careful. I'll be in trouble with the kids and the wife if I'm doing too much EV stuff. So I haven't been able to get to one of those. But they're looking around about 80 to 90p per kilowatt hour. So roughly with the exchange rate, you can double that. So you might be looking about $1.80 Australian per kilowatt to charge. So quite expensive. An interesting thing in the UK is that electricity prices appear to be starting to come down with the addition of more offshore wind into the network. So basically renewable energy is becoming more abundant here in the UK and around Scotland. So retail prices are starting to come down. However, EV charging prices are continuing to go up. A lot of people have said sort of 5 to 10% in the last 6 months. So I think that's more around the infrastructure and the building of these big forecourts and stuff. It's not necessarily the electricity cost itself. Now look, personally, while $1.80 a kilowatt is expensive, you know, you're not using it all day, every day. If you can pull in there with kids and you've got nice coffee shops and toilets and you can plug the car in and it's out of the weather, as you know, the UK gets a lot of sort of overcast, drizzly, wet weather, you're paying for that convenience. If you lived here and you owned an EV, you certainly wouldn't want to be paying that price every day to charge your EV, so you'd be looking for cheaper options. But as a traveller, I'm quite happy to pay that. So look, the prices work out from about 80 to 90p down to, if you've got a residential Octopus Energy EV account, you can recharge your EV at home, if you've got that off-street parking, for 2p a kilowatt. Now I think that's overnight, but that goes to show the variance. So then there's everything in between. So that's the EV charging pricing. As I mentioned, finding EV chargers, it's as simple as using those apps. A lot of the chargers, well, all the DC rapid chargers I've seen now are touch and pay, so you don't need to download apps. A lot of the companies, if you do download the app, they'll give you discounts. So gridserve, for instance, it's a 20% discount if you use their app. Interestingly though, and I'll put a screenshot up, as an Australian with an Australian setup, mobile, etc., I couldn't download the app. It was geo-locked to obviously the UK. So that was an interesting one. So if I do go to a gridserve charger, I'm just going to have to tap and pay, and I'll pay the full quid. But if I could download that app, 20% discount. I have downloaded a couple of the other apps. Red Dot is an app that has a lot of chargers around, particularly street AC chargers. So we've downloaded those and it's all gone pretty smoothly. Just linked it to an Australian debit or credit card and away you go. So look, that's hiring the EV, that's finding the chargers and charging the EV. Just another little general thing, I guess, about driving around in the UK. If you haven't done it, there's a lot of very tight roads. So of course, you know, the giant four-wheel drive dual cab utes that we have in Australia, very rare around here. You'll see the odd one. But the roads are very narrow, and especially some of these cities like Canterbury, who has a very old history. As we mentioned, the Canterbury Cathedral, which is a famous, probably a world famous cathedral. There's a 1400-year history there. You know, the roads weren't designed to have vehicles on them. You know, these were horse and cart things. These were, you know, donkeys, etc. So around where our friends live here in Canterbury, there is a lot of single lane roads where you literally, two cars can't pass. You've got to pull right over, mount the footpath. So the pedestrians have to stop, bike riders have to stop, vehicle has to mount the footpath, a vehicle coming in the opposite direction passes, and then you come back out. So you need to be a lot more cautious driving. And a tip is, if you're hiring a car, I would, unless you really need a bigger car, choose a smaller one. Now, for those that know the Polestar 2, and I've done a review a little while ago when the Polestar 2 first came to Australia, I'll put a link up above to that. The Polestar 2 is has a sports car type feel inside. It's a sedan slash hatch, lower sitting vehicle, but it has a wide stance. So the actual wheelbase is quite wide. So as much as the cabin sort of slopes in, you do need to be careful. Visibility is not quite as good. And so those narrow roads, they've got sort of stone gutters, etc. You do need to be a bit careful. So again, if you're not quite as confident in small areas driving, I would suggest you hire the smallest car you can get that suits your needs. Other than that, the EV navigation, fantastic. You just plug it in, same as anywhere in the world, and you just follow the navigation. People probably drive a little bit more careful here because of those narrow streets. There's lots of roundabouts with multiple directions coming off them, etc. So I have found in Brisbane the last few years, people are getting a little bit more aggressive, and when you've got these great big vehicles, you need to keep your wits about you a little bit more. Whereas Here, people are a little bit more conscious, a bit more smaller, etc. So that's getting around in your EV. So to just quickly touch a little bit more on the Polestar. So as I said, I've done a review of the Polestar, but we've had this one for a week and we've been driving it around. Beautiful vehicle to drive. Obviously, I'm making a comparison against our MG ZS EV, first generation. So software's a lot better in this car. It's really comparing chalk and cheese, but that's my easiest comparison. So software is a lot better in this car. The adaptive cruise control and the automated lane driving, fantastic. Out on the big motorways, you just set it. As long as you keep your hands on the wheel, the car drives itself, so that's been fantastic. As I mentioned, does have a little bit wider stance and the visibility is not quite as good. So being normally in an SUV, you sit up a little bit higher. So you do need to gauge where your wheels and rims are. The rims on this rental car are damaged badly on all four rims. So obviously people are running it up against gutters and all sorts of stuff. They're cosmetically damaged. There's pieces out of them and stuff. They obviously still do the job. You also sit lower in the Polestar, so obviously you're getting in and out. It's a lot lower. It's like that sports car. We've got a wide center console in the Polestar, so your legs and feet do feel a little bit like a funnel. So I guess in general it is like a sports car, which we're not as used to sitting in. However, once you are in it and you're traveling, particularly on the motorway, less glass right around. So here visibility is not quite as good, and I'll usually rest my arm there. So for me, this is a bit too high. Window buttons, which you may not be able to see in the shot there, they're a little bit too far back. So again, if I comfortably rest my arm on the armrest, the buttons aren't quite forward enough for me, so I've got to sort of squish back and get my arm there a little bit. Two cup holders in the centre. Doesn't have a sunroof in this model. Adjustable headrests. Wife really loves them. We've got them in the MG as well, but Teslas and a lot of vehicles don't have those anymore, and we've found it just a bit hard to adjust our head. Visibility out of the back window. Look, it's just okay. If that window was any narrower, that would be really poor visibility. And we've found when we've had at different times friends going different places, if you've got somebody sitting in the centre, particularly an adult, their head is sitting clearly in there and pretty much the back window is useless. I am a mirrors type person, so it's got good mirrors on the side when you're reversing or you're going really close to things on the side of the car. Some of these hedges, narrow roads, the camera will come up on the center console. It's a good camera. It's a 360 degree vertical above. However, I'm not that familiar with using them. So if you were used to that, it would be fine. If I owned the car, I would have to get used to that because that would definitely be better than trying to use this center mirror. But look, seats are good. There's reasonable space. There's a big sort of transmission humpy thing in the middle, which is partly to do with this is long range, so they've packed batteries literally everywhere. It does have a pass-through ski opening, so if you've got something long to put in the boot. And it is a hatch, but it does slope down quite a lot, like a coupe slot. So that reduces the height of what you can put in the boot. So look, I think that's about it for the video on the EV type experiences. So yeah, we'll show you a few shots around Leeds Castle. So Leeds Castle was a nice little sort of half-day trip we done out of Canterbury. We've came over and visited these friends a few times. So we've been to Canterbury a few times and we try to go to some different locations each time. It's a beautiful part of the country, has some great weather down here. I've been blown away by the weather. We had a half day yesterday afternoon. We're at the park and it just started to rain when we took the kids for a bit of a run around, but we've had some beautiful sun. It's sort of coming up to the end of September now, so summer's over. Everyone's out and about taking advantage of the last little bit of good weather before sort of winter sets in. We had a nice Aussie barbecue in the backyard the other day. Again, beautiful evening. Well, that's it for another video all the way from the United Kingdom in County Kent. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please give it the thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you could spare a couple of dollars, I'd really appreciate that via the donation links in the show notes and the platforms you'll see below. And of course, if you'd like some personalised one-on-one advice, if you're thinking about buying an EV or you've got some specific questions, please reach out via the website below. And you can book a session and we'll do some one-on-one. And if you live in Brisbane and you'd like to go for a drive in an EV, you can even book some time and we'll go for a drive in our MG ZS EV. Well, that's it. Take care, stay safe, look after your friends and family, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.